All right. So that's why cryptocurrency is a lot of reasons why people are interested in cryptography these days, although cryptography is important for a lot of other things too. So one question is, what's a blockchain? And for this, there is a video here, which I would like to play. Let me see if I can find it. It's on this page of 141. Yep, there it is. All right, let's take a look at this 2-minute video.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time, and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things.
Okay, might as well stop it there because they've descended into just complete lies, which happens a lot in the cryptocurrency space. Anyway, so that gives you a bit of an introduction to what the boosters say. And some of that stuff was true, although then it turned into complete madness. Like, I don't know how a blockchain is going to drive your car. And it was sort of interesting how the blockchain first is going to preserve your privacy, and then it's going to unmask criminals. It's not clear how it could do those two things. Anyway, I see a question here. Complete lies. Yes, quite so. Yes, the ledger. Yep, that's quite correct. It's full of lies. However, the part that's not completely a lie is the essence of how blockchain works. So let me bring this one up here. It's this project here you can do. And let's take a look at a simple online blockchain. Oh, that's rude. I wonder if the City College network is blocking it. I would imagine it is. Let's see if I can get through my phone. But if I do that, it's going to foul up the people connecting online and such. All right. I'll put off that demo until later because I don't think I would lose the connection to all the people on Zoom if I changed my network. And I imagine it's the City College network blocking everything connected to blockchains, which is rude, but anyway. All right. So Bitcoin is indeed the first killer app and arguably the only killer app. Anyway, this is the original point of this was to make some kind of money that governments could not control. So if you think you do not want the government involved in your money, Bitcoin is the answer. The problem is that means there's rampant crime. They don't have banks, the reserve, they don't enforce reserve requirement for the people that are offering banking services. They don't prevent pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes and money laundering and so on, although that's beginning to happen. So there were three killer apps. First, there was Silk Road, so you could purchase illegal things like drugs and guns. with Bitcoin, and then ransomware, of course, where you pay in Bitcoin, because for a while you could conceal your identity by having payment in Bitcoin, although now there's a lot of companies like Chainalysis that will track you down anyway. And then there are some countries like Argentina where their currency is so worthless that they're better off to just use Bitcoin. And now El Salvador has made Bitcoin their official currency. It is possible, even with all the deficiencies of Bitcoin, it might be better than whatever passes for legal currency. And that is essentially money laundering, where you put your money in something that your local government does not approve of. All right. And so years ago, a news said at least 50% of Bitcoin are owned by FBI and CIA. Wow. I have never heard that, but it certainly is true that an awful lot of it has been stolen. And the main thing that made Bitcoin really big was this guy, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. He bought $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin rose, and it actually covered the losses of his company, Tesla, for that quarter. So they met their earnings limit. And then, but lots of bad things happened other than that. But in the early days, Bitcoin was sold primarily through Mt. Gox, which is an exchange. And by the way, the guy that started it was so broke, that's why it has that name. It was originally a Magic the Gathering fan, and this was for Magic Gathering Online Exchange. He bought that domain, and when he switched into cryptocurrency, he was so broke he didn't even buy a new domain. He just repurchased the old domain. So he was the main place you buy Bitcoin for a long time, and then it got hacked and lost all of it, or somebody stole it. So that was a huge disaster, and I think still being argued about in the courts. So here's what Bitcoin looks like. It was worth nothing for the first several years. Then it had a peak here having to do with Silk Road. Then it had another peak and another peak, and that's the overall market. And the problem is there are no fundamentals with Bitcoin. It has no fundamental reason to be worth anything. Whereas if you buy a share in, say, General Motors, they sell so many cars, they pay so much fee to make the car, you can figure out how much profit they make in a year, and then the general financial rule is that you should pay the market capitalization should be 10 times profit or 20 times profit, something like that. And so you can figure out what price it's worth. But Bitcoin is not apparently worth anything, really. It's just something vague, like how much people trust it or how much they think is better than other money or something. So it blows around a lot. Well, it goes up and down a lot. Right now, it's seriously down, but I imagine it'll come back up again. The reason Bitcoin exists is to make more Bitcoin. Well, yeah, that's more or less right, Jordan. That's true of all meme stocks and like Tesla. Now, Tesla is also a meme stock, in my opinion. Tesla actually makes cars, but their price, according to normal calculations, should be like 1/10 of what they're selling at. They're selling at a huge price, far more than is justified by the cars they sell. So I think it's fair to consider them like cryptocurrency, like a meme stock. People just love Elon Musk. They think he's a genius. They think they're going to get rich by being on board of his train. So they pay a high price to buy Tesla, far more than Tesla, the company, is really worth. And that huge difference there is based on these imponderable things, like you just because he's famous, because you think he's going to do great things. Bezos is greater than Musk. Well, Bezos is much more traditional business person. Yeah, so Amazon makes money in the old-fashioned way by actually making a profit and all that jazz. Tesla makes its money by just crazy wild things, having this wild man who's a super genius. Now, by the way, if you plot the Bitcoin price on a logarithm, so that things here like $100 down to $1 and get expanded, then you see what looks like a pattern where it rises for a couple of years and then crashes and then rises and crashes. So some people convince themselves by this that it's great to buy because it'll just go up again. And maybe that's true, but there's no particularly strong reason to believe it. There are no fundamentals. It's kind of a guessing game.
Buy any of it,
What's that?
or just to buy any of it. Why buy it?
Well, the only reason to buy it is because it might go up. And the other reason to buy it is a lot of people said it was a hedge against inflation, but that has totally not worked. We've had a lot of inflation in the last year or two, and Bitcoin has fallen even more than inflation. So the original idea was it would be a place to hide from inflation, but that didn't seem to work either. So various people have tried to figure out what Bitcoin is good for using normal financial theory. Here's Bitcoin versus the tech bubble. Bitcoin went up much faster than the famous tech bubble, the internet. Bitcoin, in fact, went up as fast as the tulip bubble. This is one of the first major meme stocks, essentially, was tulips in the 1600s. People, just within a few months, they would pay millions of dollars for a tulip bulb because they were new, even though it was clearly not worth that. And Bitcoin very closely tracked it to rise up. Yeah, the tulip mania, which shows when something is just hot and it's going up and people buying it just because it's going up, pushing it up further, there's this rate of rise, which seems to be the same. Someone tried to buy physical goods with it. Yeah, it took an hour and a half to get confirmation. Absolutely. That's why that's important. If you already use Bitcoin as currency to buy things, it's essentially worthless because it takes them more like an hour for transactions to finalize. There's only one block mined every 10 minutes, and a block is not considered final until there's 5 more blocks on top of it. So it is kind of crazy. So anyway, Bitcoin doesn't really make a lot of sense for doing transactions. The total number of transactions the blockchain can handle is 3 to 4 transactions per second. Ethereum is faster, PayPal is faster, Visa is 1,000 times faster. And that's what it takes if you actually want to handle the real amount of transactions for a large, economy. So there's no way Bitcoin could ever actually be a medium of exchange where people are buying ordinary things with it. Now, maybe you could buy huge things with it like Teslas. If this will change after the merge? Yes, Ethereum will supposedly, after the merge, become able to carry many more transactions, and the transaction fee should go down. So supposedly, the merge that's coming up next month will cause Ethereum to introduce sharding, and then it will be even faster than what's shown here. But I don't think it's expected to make it up to the rate of Visa. Yeah, September 15, 16, yeah. All right, so Bitcoin does not seem to be a means of exchange. And you can see that Visa is valued at $6 per transaction, but Bitcoin is valued at $10,000 per transaction. And this was a couple of years ago, it went higher. So this value is not justified by its value as a means of exchange. So it's not cash, which was the original thing it was supposed to be. Is it a store of value? Well, if once per quarter, it crashes by 50% or more, or by a lot. So it certainly doesn't hold value in a steady way. Gold is the classic store of value. And as you can see, the point of gold is it hardly moves at all. Years can go by and gold moves very little. So if you want to avoid crashing and avoid inflation and everything else, the classic thing you do is buy gold. And Bitcoin is not proven to be more stable than gold. There used to be these initial coin offerings where all the rage, instead of issuing stock, you'd issue coins. That seems to have gone away, and it was pretty much fake all along. Hello. What you, yeah, that's right. This is cryptography. Great. Have a seat. All right. Anyway, so Tether has a huge market capitalization, and this is an issue. Tether is fake dollars backed by essentially nothing that they use to pump up the price of Bitcoin. And there've been an awful lot of it issued, and people are expecting it to crash pretty soon. Several other so-called stable coins tied to the value of a dollar have in fact crashed. Anyway, and when it does crash, what is a huge problem that happens all the time? Every time the price of cryptocurrency goes down, people try to sell, and the blockchain cannot handle the transactions. And the exchanges turn off the transactions. Coinbase does, and they all do, so you cannot withdraw your money. This is what happened in 1929. People invested their money. When they went to the bank to get it, the bank said no, and they just shut and didn't give them their money, and they were hosed. By the way, it just happened in China. The Chinese banks just refused to return money to people, starting a lot of riots there. So that's the problem with cryptocurrency. You can buy in and you can watch some number in a computer go up, but when you try to sell, you're likely to find you cannot sell, and you watch helplessly while the price plummets. All right. So anyway, Ethereum is the next step up from Bitcoin. Wait, it didn't Tether crash? No, many of the other crashes. Tether did not crash yet. What crashed was several other stable coins, but not Tether yet, although Tether is worrisome. The main thing that's been proven about Tether is that their claims that they are backed by a large reserve of dollars have been pretty much proven false. Tether, in fact, has a reserve which is mostly invested in other cryptocurrencies which have also crashed. So Tether is supposed to have Tether is supposed to equal $1, but in fact, when you sell your Tether, you may not be able to get your dollar. And people have been selling Tether. We'll see. If the cryptocurrency price continues to stay low, it's expected that Tether will collapse before too much longer. And if it does, that'll really rock the cryptocurrency space much more.
Bad.
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the problem. You got the government out of your money. So now you got the Wild West with crime running rampant. The only thing that's lived up to the claim of cryptocurrency has been drugs. So what about Monero? Monero serves the purpose of being a privacy coin, I think, and you can mine it with by stealing bandwidth from other people's machines. As far as I know, Monero is the same as all the rest, not any better, not any worse. Anyway, the two that are big, though, are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they will probably survive this crash. Those are the stable ones. So Ethereum can do more than just store cash. It can run a program. And the original plan of this was you would make a program that was run by a computer called a distributed organization, and that would not live on any country. It would live on the blockchain. So they hoped they could avoid all taxes and all government regulations. So they get government out of your company, just the way Bitcoin was intended to get the government out of your money. Now, governments have moved in and imposed regulations on both systems, and that's increasing because, of course, you can't escape the government. Even if you put your stuff on a computer, you still live somewhere and you're subject to their laws. The original organization to justify Ethereum was the DAO, and this was the investment organization that ran on an Ethereum blockchain. It started with 150 million investment. It was greatly trumpeted, and people pointed out there were some security flaws, but were ignored. So it got, after it launched in May, and by June, a hacker stole half the money in the blockchain. And then the organizers of DAO complained to Ethereum and said, please roll the blockchain back a month and redo the last month so we don't have to experience that hack. And they said no, because the Ethereum organization, just if you go to Amazon and you rent an Amazon cloud server and you put software on it and you get hacked, you can try asking Amazon, will you give me my money? And they'll say, no, all we did was rent you a machine. The machine worked. The fact that your software is bad and you got hacked is not our problem. And that's the attitude that the Ethereum maintainers took towards these guys. Look, you put this thing on there. It's not our problem. So the so-called white hat hackers came in and duplicated the attack and stole all the rest of the money. So now the whole thing was down to zero, and it was $150 million loss. And that was enough to embarrass Ethereum enough that they did roll it back and restart the blockchain, erasing a month of transactions. And after that, there are now two DAOs. There was the new Ether, where none of that happened, and the old Ether, where the theft happened. And the original plan was all the miners should move to the new Ether, and the old one would vanish. But what happened is they did that, and the price of the old Ether fell, but the competition among the miners fell even more. So it became more profitable to mine the old Ether. So it continued. So they're now both continuing, and it forked again later. So there are now 4 flavors of Ethereum out there. And a lot of people believe this would cause loss in faith in the cryptocurrency, but they can point out the same thing happened to the stock exchange twice. The New York Stock Exchange had to roll back 3 to 4, something like 3 days of transactions about 15 years ago when program trading first hit. When people first started using computers to trade, they would pick a level, and when a stock fell below that level, they would all sell. And so everybody picked the same level and everything was crashing. And so they had to roll back the stock exchange. And in 2008 or so, maybe 2010, they rolled back the London Stock Exchange because it always run it on Unix, but Microsoft managed to convince them to move it to Windows, claiming Windows was now stable enough to run the London Stock Exchange, and it was not. So it crashed. So they had to roll the London Stock Exchange back. So the cryptocurrency people can defend themselves by saying the currency you all know and trust is not really any better. And maybe that's true. It certainly has a lot of scandals in both systems. So anyway, those are the white hat hackers that stole the remaining money. All right. And so there are many, many other hacks out there. Many systems get hacked all the time. There was a parity wallet, the fastest and most secure way of interacting, but it got hacked, destroyed a bunch of money, lost a bunch of funds. People get their funds frozen by losing the private keys. Many, many, many hacks. Here's one that was most amazing thing. Somebody stole $600 million last year and then just gave it back. Like, this shows that all the people in cryptocurrency just seem to be insane. They throw out unthinkable amounts of money like it's nothing. And it's just like a game to them. What's that? Yeah, he threw a coin, you say. Yeah, he stole it. He got it's from one of the cross-bridge networks. That's one really fragile. Is the DAO only associated with Ethereum? Well, the DAOs run on Ethereum, but now there are several other blockchains that can also run DAOs, like Avalanche and Solana. Although they're not as common, they're much cheaper. Solana is kind of incredible. Solana lets you run smart contracts, but the Solana blockchain is so buggy, it has crashed 9 times this year where the blockchain stopped running. And I don't even know how that's possible. The whole point of the blockchain is there's many machines working, but somehow the whole thing froze 7 or 9 times in a year. So that's not encouraging. All right. And so Tesla dumped its Bitcoin holdings a year after buying them and switched to Dogecoin. Dogecoin is even stupider than Bitcoin. Dogecoin was a joke. This guy decided to make Dogecoin by just copying the Bitcoin code and modifying it to make it stupid. Bitcoin has some features that are supposed to make it smart. Like one feature is the reward for mining keeps going down. So total amount of Bitcoins that will ever be created is 21 million and no more. And he took that out. And he sped it greatly up to there's a block every 10 seconds instead of every minute, 10 minutes, and just put a dog on it and released it as a joke. So he said, I didn't think about anything. I only spent 2 hours making it. It's just a joke. But it was never supposed to be worth anything. It was supposed to be a lighthearted joke, but it became a big one, like the number 3 cryptocurrency, and Elon Musk likes it better. So it's really big. And it violates all, even what's called good principles, even in the world of cryptocurrency. But Elon doesn't care. He says it's great because of the pretty dog on the cover and because it's cheap. And he does make the argument it's better for using for exchanges because you can afford it and throw it around. And he thinks just printing more and more money forever, which is what it does. It's inflationary. It just prints a whole bunch of like 600 million more Doge a year forever. Might be better. I don't know. Anyway, that's the game. So anyway, so blockchains are the technology behind this. And let's see a question here about quantum attacks. There are no quantum attacks of any significance on anything yet, really. If you imagine in 10 or 20 years, quantum computers get powerful enough to break, say, 1024-bit RSA, then they still wouldn't be able to break Bitcoin because it relies on SHA-256. And as far as anybody knows, we will never be able to break SHA-256. Quantum attacks. Quantum computers, yeah. Quantum computers, a different kind of computer, which will crack some cryptography. Now, Bitcoin also uses, I think, elliptic curve cryptography, and there may come a time when something's able to crack that, but certainly not yet. Anyway, so the point of a distributed ledger is,
Sorry,
yeah.
let's piggyback on that.
Yeah.
256.
Yeah.
There is, shock fight, well, you think
There
the
is.
next 50 to 150 years, for example, you think within the next 150 years, you think there's going to be something to crack those levels of security?
Nobody knows, but currently it seems like SHA-256 will never be cracked, as far as we know now. But you never know what you don't know. But it's not expected to crack, and neither is AES-256. AES-128, it might crack. Quantum computers might crack that. And they certainly will crack all sizes of RSA. That's why we're having the National Institute of Standards is currently having a contest to come up with a post-quantum algorithm. And the first some of the favorites, like the one Google put out, I was going to add to this class, went down a few months ago. Somebody cracked it. So nobody knows what we're going to switch to. We're going to have to switch to a different kind of encryption in the next 10 or 20 years, but they haven't decided what it is yet.
Well, someone, the Google thing cracked thing.
Yeah, I thought it was a good one, A New Hope. It was, people attacked it for years, and a cryptographer found a serious flaw in it just a month or two ago.
Wow.
That's the problem. So even the 3 that are currently the leaders, you probably shouldn't trust them because somebody might find a flaw in them too. So it's a good thing. The quantum computers are not here yet, not to really do anything, but they probably will be here in about 10 years. And so we need to have something working by then. And it looks like we better wait a few years for these post-quantum algorithms.
Quantum
Yeah.
computer, you said? Is there some sort of special design server that's just meant for that job?
No, quantum computers use a completely different fundamental principle. Digital computers use transistors that are on or off. And so everything is just binary math. Quantum computers use these things called qubits that are in an uncertain state between 0 and 1, and they have quantum mechanical interactions with other qubits, the most important one being entanglement. So they have a totally different fundamental physics, and each qubit contains much more information than a bit. So if you can make something with, say, 100 or 1,000 working qubits, you can do awesome things like crack cryptography, but nobody can build that hardware yet.
Right.
The hardware is really hard to build, and the hardware we have now is very buggy and very noisy. So,
Professor,
yeah,
if I may say something about quantum computer,
yeah, go
or
ahead.
just to people have an idea.
Yeah.
So basically, when it's in physics, right, electronic in general, we are trapping the electron, right? We are using the electron to make work, In a quantum computer, we're gonna use light. So you're gonna need to trap the light. That's why it's the challenge of the hardware that you're telling about.
Well, you can use electrons too. You could use electron spin. But you can use, but the point is you use atoms one at a time instead of a whole group of atoms. But anyway, we'll talk more about quantum computers later, but the most practical thing to know about them is that they don't work yet, but they're improving all the time. And so people are worried that in 10 or 20 years, they will break our current systems of cryptography, but only the public key ones are the only ones that are really going to harm.
So how many, like, because a regular computer, what the bit is like 8 bytes, you know? How many is a quantum?
Well, they only talk about them in terms of bits right now. And it's 8 bits to a byte in a normal computer, and you have to process a lot of those to get anything done. In quantum computers, it'll be the biggest quantum computer now have maybe 100 bits, but they're very noisy. And 100 qubits. There's some bigger ones. And they do weird things like quantum annealing. It's very hard to compare them. It'll be a much smaller number of qubits than you have bits in a normal computer, but it'll be much more powerful. But right now they have to be cooled near absolute zero, and they're very fragile and very expensive. Like the first computer, right? The first computers were the size of a building, and they had vacuum tubes for every bit, and just like that. That's why people are worried. They say right now they're just a toy, but in 20 or 30 years, maybe they'll, and in principle, they can run a different class of software, which could crack certain kinds of cryptography, because the fundamental operations are different. Good, these are good. Anyway, so the point of blockchains is you can have a ledger that records facts that anybody can write to the ledger, but nobody can change what's written there. So it's good for something like an event log or a financial ledger, keeping track of transactions. That's the idea. And so there are a lot of jobs in it. So some students who took these classes and went and got jobs in cryptocurrency, they're all around here. I don't recommend much investing in cryptocurrency. It's highly risky, but getting a job working at a company, working with cryptocurrency, I think is important. So we'll talk more about this later, but in Bitcoin, you just have transactions. You feed in your money, you give some to Bob and some back to Alice, and then what's left over is a tip for the miner. When you when you spend Bitcoin, you send a transaction onto the network, and it goes out there, and you hope a miner will mine it. The miners just sweep up transactions, build a block, and mine it. And they do not need to mine all the transactions. And because Bitcoin has a very limited number of transactions per second it can handle, it often gets busy, so they cannot mine all the transactions. So you have to leave a fee for the miner to encourage them to mine your transaction. And that can get really large, like $50 or $100, where you're not actually going to be able to spend your Bitcoin without paying a transaction fee. So the blocks are signed with SHA-256 hashes. Although it's unfortunately not exactly SHA-2, well, in Ethereum it's not. I'm not sure about Bitcoin. The hash must start with a lot of zeros. That's what mining is. You take the block of data, you calculate the hash, it's effectively a random number, and that's like a lottery ticket. Then you change one of the numbers, you have a notch you can change, and try again and again and again until you get one that starts with 69 zeros. So it will take billions of guesses to find one. That's what Bitcoin mining is. You're just guessing, trying to draw a winning lottery ticket. So it wastes an incredible amount of power and processing time on the fastest computers in the world, where they all compete to mine this block. And when somebody mines the block, they announce it, people agree that it's mined, and they move on to the next block. And the point of that is that makes it secure, because if anybody wanted to hack the system, they would have to have a faster computer, and they would make more money just mining than they would trying to hack the system. That's the idea. So and somebody's, my goodness, somebody's sending me messages. Somebody with no name is just sending me offensive messages full of courage. I appear to have a person attempting to spam my Zoom. Anyway, see, somebody broke MD5 and SHA-1. That's true, right? So people are saying, yep. All right, I see a few statements about this. Yeah, quite a lot of qubits going by. All right, anyway, we'll carry on. May have to throw this guy out of the class so I can figure out where he is. But we'll see if he manages to find something that's irritating enough to do. Probably this guy. Anyway, we'll see. Anyway, so all right. So the miners get an award every time they mine a block, and that's why they do it. They get a transaction fees, which will continue, and they get a reward. It was 25 Bitcoins. It might have gone down to 12.5 by now. It halves every 4 years. So that's the point. Bitcoin demonstrates that the blockchain does work. The blockchain of Bitcoin has never been seriously hacked. So it does show that there is this type of database that can be used. Now, what it's good for, nobody really knows. The only real application right now is Bitcoin. It was invented by a person with a fake name in 2009. And this person, after inventing it, vanished and never came back, owns an incredible amount of Bitcoin that's just sitting there in a wallet. Presumably this person died or just left it. So a Merkle tree is the data structure invented by Merkle, a famous mathematician, computer scientist. You have a block of data, you take a hash, you add that hash as part of the data in the next block and hash it again in the next block. So you have a tree of data where verifying things at the bottom of the tree means everything must be intact all the way up because each block contains the hash of the previous block. And Bitcoin is just a linear Merkle tree where you don't have any branching, you just have first block, second block, third block, fourth block. Well, I guess it reads this way, pardon me. First block, second block, third block, and each block hash is included in the next block. So if you check the current block's hash and it's correct, that means the whole chain is intact up to that point. So it's very easy for everyone to verify that it has not been altered. And that's why you have an immutable ledger appropriate for something like a financial transaction. So a block is just a group of transactions. Every computer doing mining has the whole blockchain. Every 10 minutes, you form a block and put a hash value, and that person gets a reward. And this is called proof of work. When you mine it, you must have made billions of guesses to find that hash. So that proves that you did a lot of work. And that's why people get upset. So others, where are new blocks added? They're added at the end of the chain. Every 10 minutes, you get another block, and every miner adds it to the end of the chain, and the database just grows forever. It was about 150 gigabytes a year or so ago. So it just grows every 10 minutes, another block goes on. Yep. So not at the root, no, at the leaves, right at the end. Yeah, the old part of the chain is never changed. You always add a new block at the end. So the history never changes. That's the idea. That's the value of it. It's an immutable record of the past. So the Genesis block is what started it all. You can view them all on various blockchain explorers online. And the Genesis block has some place where you can put a text, and this is the text in the Genesis block, was a headline from the London Times showing that the government bailed out the banks. And this is why it existed, because the person that made this apparently was not happy with the government meddling with money. And they didn't want to make a form of money that the government cannot devalue. They can't print more, they can't bail out the banks. We want to have money like gold that's just there, that no government can mess with. That was the goal of Bitcoin. And it did pretty much achieve that. No government can really do much to Bitcoin. Although what they can do is they can regulate the exchanges where you buy and sell Bitcoin, and they have. So when the Canadian truckers had a protest about COVID, the US government and the Canadian government froze accounts of Bitcoin at the main exchanges. And the exchanges, they still had the Bitcoin, but they couldn't transfer it into money at those exchanges. And when the Canadian oil pipeline got ransomware about a year ago, they paid a ransom, several $million, but they passed, the US government managed to seize it back. And the explanation I heard at the time, although I don't think it was ever publicly admitted, was they tried to transfer it through Coinbase, which is a crook, shouldn't go through a public exchange, but they did. And the government asked Coinbase to grab the money and not pass it on, and they did. So even though the blockchain itself is distributed, if you turn it into cash, you have to pass through a bank, and they're not distributed, and they can get a court order and they can hold on to the money, and that happened. Yeah, the government has control over the part where you go to real money. But if you had just gone to some other nation like China or something, or North Korea, and turned it into cash over there, there would have been no way to stop it. But they passed it through something the government did have control over. All right. Anyway, so that's the quick summary of blockchains. Let me stop this recording. I'm going to make these separate.